Happy Sunday, everybody. It's another wonderful day for a magical movie review. I have decided to reorganize myself with my movie reviews. I was gonna watch every single Disney animated movie in order of release date, like I mentioned on my last video, but after going through some of the planning and thinking about when I would be watching some of the movies, like a lot of the Christmas movies and everything, I wanted to be able to kind of have more control over a certain set. So I decided that I would do groups of animated movies by category, still do the movies in that category by release date, so I'm going in order of when we all received the magic, but instead of moving in order, kind of keeping my mind frame on one particular type of Disney movie is going to be easier to give you guys the information that I think you would most enjoy. I would have started with this category anyway, so it really works out. But since we did Snow White last week, we're going to continue with the princess Disney movie theme, and our next magical movie review will be of the Disney classic Cinderella. So the original Disney Cinderella was released in 1950. We've had a big jump between Disney princess movies, so the first one being Snow White in 1937, so we're jumping almost 13 years in the future. So something new that I'm trying this week is a magical recap. Instead of running through the whole movie, every detail again, I'm gonna do a quick synopsis, 30 seconds. Yes, I did write it down. Yes, I did practice. So I know that it's around 30 seconds, but I'm cutting it close. So here we go. On your mark, get set, go. Happy family. Mom, dad, Cinderella. Oh no, wife dies. Dad remarries bitch with 2 daughters. Oh no, dad dies. They treat Cindy like shit. 10 years go by. Oh no, still assholes. King decides prince needs to marry. Have a ball. Cindy wants to go but ends up getting the boot. She cries. Fairy godmother's like, yo, hold my beer. Decks her out, but says, hey girl, you got a curfew. Cool. Cindy goes to the ball. Meets the prince. Doesn't know it's the prince. Oh no, it's midnight. Run, run, run. Cindy loses her glass slipper. Keeps running, goes home, everything's fine. King says we have to find this girl, get those feet in those shoes. Cindy busts out of the attic like, yo, here's my tiny ass feet. Yay, they fit. She marries the prince. Happy ever after. I'm cooked. That took a while to practice. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, let me know and I'll keep going. It's definitely tiring. I loved it though. That was really a lot of fun to put that together, so I'll probably keep that going. Now that we've caught ourselves up on Cinderella, for those of you who may have never seen it or haven't seen it in a while, hopefully that was at least a good foundation for you to start from. So now we'll move into what I like to call the things that I like and the things that I don't like. And typically those things, instead of calling them pros and cons, I usually like to theme them after the movie itself. So I've decided to call the good things the Brunos, and the bad things are the things that I didn't particularly like about the movie, the Lucifers. I know, very appropriate. We'll start with the Brunos. One of my favorite things about Cinderella, and probably most of the Disney princess movies, is going to be the soundtrack. This soundtrack is classic. It really doesn't have as many as I remember. Of course, there's A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes. We start with that right off the bat. And then Sing Sweet Nightingale, which is really only about 30 seconds of song. And then So This Is Love. I really enjoyed that it was centered on Cinderella singing these songs. It really showcased her voice, which is another Bruno for me, especially compared to Snow White. If you watch my last video, you know I'm not a huge fan of her voice, or maybe the voice actor's portrayal of Snow White, but I thought she had a really great tone. I thought the music, her singing voice and her speaking voice were very humble, which is very on brand for Cinderella as a whole. In addition to Cinderella, I just thought all of the voice actors did a fantastic job. As we kind of evolve over the Disney era, we've gone from okay, we just hire voice actors and they play these characters. We've hired people to actually play the emotion of the character too. And I thought Anastasia, Drizella, Madame Tremaine, the mice, like I just thought they were all so funny, and I just really enjoyed those secondary characters, mostly because of just the comedic relief that they bring to the film. And that's hard to do with just your voice. And of course the animation is fun and it gives it life too, but even just the way that they deliver lines are hysterical. Speaking of hysterical, I also thought the animal sidekicks in this film, especially the mice, especially Bruno, like I just think they're so funny, and they actually have like a character of their own. And they have their own little personalities, they have their own trials and tribulations, while separate, like still somehow apply to the story. When Jack and Gus and the other 3 little mice that they're hanging out with are trying to get breakfast in the morning, but they have to distract Lucifer, it still somewhat applies to how like Cinderella's struggling to even just get a crumb of the wealth that her family has, even though it's inherently hers as well. One of the other things that I love about the story, the love story between Cinderella and Prince Charming, I think it's more believable this time. We've got at least a night, a party's worth of interaction for them to actually like fall in love with each other. And while still in real life, one night is not usually the end-all be-all for everybody else, it's still more than like a trespasser on your property than marrying him after he mouth kisses you awake. Cough cough, Snow White. I at least thought it was believable that he met this girl at a party. I mean, how many movies have we seen that like you meet a girl at a party, you didn't catch her name, so you like go digging to find her, usually, except now it's through social media rather than a glass slipper, but it still works. For the Lucifers, for the things that stood out to me that I didn't like about the film, and I noticed this about Snow White's characters too, but I didn't, it wasn't really a big thing, I think because this time it just repeated itself. The noses of the human characters drive me insane. Okay, if you're looking at a character from this angle, like you can see their nose, you can see the shape of their nose, but when they're like facing the camera, it's straight up just like Voldemort slits on their face. You know that that's not how it is in real life, right? And granted, I know that animation is not real life, whatever, like it's fine, it all works out, the animation is still beautiful. It's clearly taking Disney a while to get the noses right in these Disney classic characters. That's the one thing off the bat that just I kind of noticed this time, and I was like, huh, Snow White had a Voldemort nose too. The other thing that I found myself getting annoyed with, or adding to the downfall of like cats being jerks, kind of stereotype, if you will. Like, of course they named the cat Lucifer. That's not really setting the cat up for success. Like, it's gonna be the devil. And then, like, doing the whole Tom and Jerry thing with the cat chasing the mice. Like, I mean, literally in this time frame, we're getting so many cartoons with that common storyline. Like, it's really just, they're adding it in there for comedic relief. But it's the same, like, let's come up with something a little bit more unique. Like, I'd even rather just see the mice doing some funny stuff. Like, them making the dress, I thought that that was precious and clever, the way that they, like, moved the materials around and shared the tools. Like, I thought it was fantastic. The whole cat mouse thing, like, it didn't really add anything to the story. And also being a cat mom myself, I'm also just getting a little tired of cats being jerks. It's not true in real life. Last thing on my list is the actual glass slipper incident. This bitch loses her shoe 3 times. 3 times. First, she loses like her regular shoe just walking up the stairs in her own house. That I can kind of understand if it's like a slip-on slipper, like that's all happened to us. Okay, once is fine. Foreshadowing, I get it. The glass slipper falling off in the first place doesn't really make sense. If the shoe was made perfectly for her, why does it keep falling off? Why did it fall off in the first place? And then of course they get married, she's wearing the same glass slippers, or at least like a carbon copy of them, and she loses her shoe again on the way back down the stairs after they get married. Like, can the girl not get a decent cobbler? Like, come on. Like, that's just, I don't know why it irritates me so much. Like, I understand that that's like how they find each other and how they fall in love, like if the shoe fits. I'm like, I can't deal with that. So those are my big Bruno's, Lucifer's pros and cons to the Cinderella movie. Now, another thing that I like to do is just kind of a general observation category. These things aren't really necessarily pros and cons, but things that I've noticed, especially now that we're moving into multiple Disney princess movies, common themes, differences, just things that I notice as we're watching these films together. One of the first things that I noticed right off the bat is when the credits are over in the beginning, they still do the storybook opening, which I do love, and they show the words on the page, and then the camera zooms in and we actually have a narrator this time. So with Snow White, you just read the words on the page and there's no voice reading it to you at all. So they actually use the zoom in, they show the letters, but then they kind of zoom into the illustration of the story to zoom into the lives of Cinderella and her family. Another observation, of course, animation, while I thought Snow White was fantastic for its time, animation for Cinderella is so much better. Like, we've got more fluid movements, the characters are actually moving around more and moving like real people. I know that the Evil Queen had her cloak and I'm still obsessed with that, but now it's just taking it to a whole new level. As far as Disney princess movies go, I think we still have all of the same common themes. We've got a girl in distress, they end up marrying a prince of some kind, and really they all just live happily ever after, and we don't really find anything out about these secondary characters, like whatever happened to the stepmother and the sisters. We don't know. Like, they play such an integral part of the beginning of the film, but we don't have any answers after that. Like, Cinderella gets married and then bah. Like, which is probably fine, like they don't really need to be part of the story. Maybe we'll find out more in future Cinderella films. My VMP, my very magical person for Cinderella, is going to be, drum roll, I would make the sound, but I'm not that talented, Jacques. I'd say the main mouse, probably. I think that's fair to say. He is involved in every single part of the story. He's the common theme when it comes to supporting characters. He is just very admiring of Cinderella. He likes that she treats them well and knows that he can go to her for any other help that they might need. So for example, he's the one that finds Gus Gus in the trap and tells Cinderella and gets him acclimated to the new home that he's going to be living in. He also is kind of the leader of the group. While he loses, he still comes up with the idea to pull tails to see who's going to be the decoy mouse for Lucifer when they're trying to get breakfast. He and Gus Gus are the ones that go out and find extra material for Cinderella's dress, helps rescue her. He motivates Gus Gus and the rest of the mice and the animals to help her out. Without his character in the movie, there probably wouldn't be a happy ever after, right? Like, if he wasn't in there, if he wasn't in the movie, Cinderella might not have gotten out of the room in the first place. So I'm going to say that he will be my VMP for this movie. I think Cinderella is a close second. I think she's one of my favorite Disney princesses, one because she's a classic. We kind of get an extra magical sense of her, especially if you're a parks goer. for Walt Disney World. She is kind of front and center, literally, with her castle in the middle. Do you see her castle right there on Main Street as you're walking down? I think she's also one of my favorite characters because, like, she does care for animals. I think above all else, while she does know that she's beautiful, like she checks herself out in some of those suds bubbles when she's mopping the floor, like patting her hair. So I know that she knows that she's pretty, which is fine, but she holds being kind to everyone to a higher level. Because, I mean, even when she's running away from the prince, like she's booking it to her carriage so she can get home on time, she still makes an effort to turn around as she's running away and wave and say goodbye to the Duke, who's like guarding the curtain so that they can have some alone time together. Most other characters, if they're like they're running away from a situation, they're not taking the time to say goodbye or hello to other people. So I think that she would be a close second. And of course we wouldn't have Cinderella the movie without Cinderella, but I think for the storyline to progress the way that it is and to have the comedy, the wholeheartedness, the just a heavy part in the storytelling, I think Jacques is going to be my VMP for sure. Okay, so if you've had enough, you can definitely stop watching now. This is kind of the end of the actual Disney movie part. I enjoy reviewing and finding out more information about the origins of these stories. So I did a little digging, spent quite a bit of time on the interwebs, because the story of Cinderella, or a Cinderella story, has been told for millennia. Like, there's been so many iterations modern day that I know a lot of us know about, but they're even dating some of these stories of Cinderella or a similar character to like Greek or Chinese origin, like BCE. Like it's going far back. For the purposes of this particular adaptation of Disney's of the story of Cinderella, just from what I gather from multiple different sources, it's pulling from these two major origin stories. Now, the first and the primary is a French story called Cinderella or the Little Glass Slipper from 1697 by Charles Perrault. He was considered the originator of the Cinderella story. Diving into this particular story, I read it all. I'll put the link to the story in the description here. It pretty much lines up with the Disney story that we're used to. I think really some of the only major differences are the dad doesn't die. Her mother still dies, and that's who she gets her goodness from. They go into a little bit more of the mother side of the story, mostly just to say that that's where like Cinderella gets her beauty and her outside and inside beauty from. And then what are some of the other ones? There's still two stepsisters. There's still the evil stepmother character, but there's at least just slight liking of Cinderella from the stepsisters. The stepsisters seem a little bit different in age, whereas in the Disney film they make us think that they're like twins, or like Irish twins at the very least, because they say that they're Cinderella's age. The younger stepsister in this story does kind of ask Cinderella if she's going to go to the ball, kind of shows a little very, very minute kindness to her, but overall I think just mimics the older sister. They go to the ball. Oh, that's the other thing. The ball in both of these stories, the original and the other Brothers Grimm story, is that the ball lasts like 2 or 3 days. So it's more like Cinderella keeps going back for more and finding out, like, or falling more and more in love with the prince himself. I think the only other big notation is Cinderella has more forgiveness in her heart. While in the movie we don't really know what happens to the step family, in this story we find out that Cinderella actually gives housing to her sisters on the castle property. So she actually like welcomes the family to join her. So I think that that's an interesting end to a story that Disney didn't pick up on, because I think it just doesn't play into like the evil stepsister story very much. Now, of course, the other story, the other origin is a Brothers Grimm story. I think they take on a lot of the original from Mr. Charles, and they kind of move it into a much darker place, a much more aggressive place. But that's no surprise to us, right? Like, it's Brothers Grimm. Still very dark in the beginning. They lose the mom. Dad doesn't die in this story either. What's a little bit more grim in this one is she visits her mother's grave like every day, sometimes 3 times a day. Her father is leaving town one weekend and he's like, he asks all the daughters, the step and Cinderella, what do you want me to bring back for you? They're like fancy stuff. And then Cinderella's like, I want you to bring me the twig that hits your hat on your way home. So he's like, okay, I'll do that for you. Brings back the twig. She takes it and lays it on the grave of her mother, and then of course that grows a tree. And then whenever anything bad happens, she goes and sits under this tree and cries, and there's a bird in the tree, and that bird will grant her wishes. I think that there's a connection here with the Disney film. After reading that, immediately my mind jumped to when they tear Cinderella's dress apart and she cries and like runs out into the courtyard. She throws herself onto a bench underneath a tree, and that's when the fairy godmother pops up and grants her the wish. So I think this particular story is somewhat embedded into the Disney film, because there's this like those little things like that. Of course, in the Brothers Grimm story, it's still the bird that's granting the wishes. The bird gives her the dress, still gives her what she needs to get to the ball. The ball is still 3 days. It's a very long party, probably a party that I would never go to. The other funny thing about the actual ball is the prince tries to chase after her every time, and Cinderella escapes in some kind of funny way, like jumping down a tree or into a nest of some kind, and always evades the prince. She does this the first 2 times. The 3rd time, the prince actually tries to trap her on the stairs as she's running down by basically putting like tar, and this time her slipper gets stuck and then like pulls it off her and she keeps running. So it doesn't trap her, but that's how he gets the shoe this time, which in my opinion makes a little bit more sense than like the perfect shoe falling off your foot, but that's neither here nor there. He gets the shoe. They still decide that that's how they're gonna find the maiden. They show up to their house. Of course, stepmother is the one that's like, you gotta make the shoe fit. One of you is gonna marry the prince. The first daughter, it all fits except her big toe can't fit in the shoe. So the stepmother hands her a knife and says, cut off your toe. Once you're queen, you won't need to walk anywhere. What a simple solution. Like, if I can't find a shoe that fits at the store, I'm just gonna start cutting all my toes off. That'll work. Anyway, she puts the shoe on. She shows the prince like, hey, it fits. Of course he believes her. And then they get in the carriage. They're gonna ride off into the sunset. They pass the same magical tree. And then the bird is like, hey, yo, check the shoe. And he looks down and sees blood like spilling out of the shoe. So he's like, oh wait, it's not you. So then they go back. Fine. The second daughter tries it. She can get her whole foot in except for the heel. Can you guess what happens next? Of course, the stepmother hands her the knife, says cut your heel off, you don't need it. Like, once you're queen, you won't need to walk anywhere anymore. Of course, the prince, not thinking to check the shoe again for blood, says, cool, let's get out of here. Let's get married. He's taking her in the carriage, passes the same tree. Bird's like, ayo, you're dumb as shit. Check the shoe. And he looks down and like her stocking is full of blood. He's like, okay, perfect. We'll just go back and it's fine. Of course, Cinderella gets to try on the shoe. It's a perfect fit. And then she also whips out the other ones like, hey yo, I got this, the pair. They put the shoes on and then they pass the bird and the bird's like, yeah, you got the right girl. And then they live happily ever after. In this story, we actually find out what happens, at least to the sisters. We don't really find out what happens to the mother, but on the carriage ride home, she gets two little birdies that are sitting on her shoulder. When they get married, when they're kind of walking into the church, the sisters just straight up show up and just like stand next to her. I guess thinking that they're gonna be a bridesmaid. They didn't really explain like where they came from or why they're standing there. And the birds are still sitting on her shoulders and they peck one of the eyes out on each of the sisters. Then when they're leaving the church, the girls swap sides and then the birds peck the other eye out. So now their punishment is to be blind forever. All of these stories end very aggressively. Like there's a good ending where like the princess or the girl in the story like gets the happy ending, but like somebody's gotta die or lose a limb or an eyeball or something at the end. Like that just seems a little aggressive. As far as other Cinderella stories, I mean, of course, we all know, like, there's literally a Cinderella story with every Disney Channel star, Hilary Duff, Selena Gomez, whoever. And yes, I've seen those movies, but they're not any different. I mean, you can basically, we're in the habit of calling everything a Cinderella story anyway. And that was actually one of the articles I read. Basically, anytime something good happens to a nice person that's not wealthy, like especially in the cinematic world, is considered a Cinderella story. Or in sports, like a small town team or a small town guy or girl joins a big league, like it's a Cinderella story. Like they had the come up or whatever. Like it's never really truly like the Cinderella story, like when you think about it from all sides. Now I will say, I've loved the live action Cinderella movie. I liked that it had the same songs in the background. It was interesting that they didn't make it a musical, but I still really enjoyed it. I do love, even though it's not Disney, but I love the Roger and Hammerstein's, I love the play, the Cinderella play, but I love the Brandy Cinderella movie. It's one of my favorite movies. I love the music, I love the cast and how diverse it is, and of course Whitney Houston is my idol. I love her so much, so her playing fairy godmother is like a dream come true. Like one of my favorite fairy tale stories has one of my favorite singers in it, so like I'm happy with it. So if you haven't seen that movie or the live action Cinderella, I definitely would recommend both of those. So that's it. That is my magical movie review of Disney's Cinderella from 1950. I hope you enjoyed. If there's anything else that you noticed from the film or any other Cinderella stories that you would like to add, please comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And I will see you guys next week for the next princess movie. Getting up close and personal today. So I don't really have like Cinderella themed outfits. Like, even though she's one of my favorite characters, I feel like I should. But I did do the blue uniglitter today. And then of course my Walt Disney World shirt in Cinderella blue, and at the very least it has the castle there in the background. So that's what you're getting today. And then this hot mess of a mop hair that I have. Oh well.